We love our hobby, whether it's collecting, painting minis, or playing tabletop games with those minis. We love it. But if we love it so much, why is it so hard for us to spend time on our hobby? Let's run through a scenario real quick, and you tell me down in the comments if any of it sounds familiar to you. Most days, I wake up in the morning, get ready for work, and spend a good chunk of my day working a full-time job at the office. I get home, want to spend time with the family, have dinner, play with the kids, maybe even take care of some chores or other responsibilities. Eventually we get the kids down to bed, and I'd like to spend time with my significant other. Maybe we want to watch that movie or TV show that we've been wanting to for weeks. Finally, at the very end of the night, I have time to myself to unwind. Have a little bit of me time. But man, I've had a full day already. I'm tired. Do I really want to pull out all my painting supplies? Maybe I just want to sit back and relax after my long day, read a book, or watch some YouTube instead. Does any of that sound familiar? It's a pretty typical day for me. Sometimes I just don't have the energy left to spend on myself, especially if there are roadblocks or problems stopping me from enjoying the hobby. Now, I'm not trying to imply that family or responsibilities are problems. They aren't. What I mean are those little things that kind of add up and might cause you to do something else instead of hobbying. I recently ran into a problem when I came downstairs to paint. The camera mount arm that I usually use to hold up my camera when I'm painting for YouTube had completely collapsed under its own weight. It had just kind of fallen over. Luckily, my camera wasn't attached to it at the time, but when I came downstairs and saw that, my motivation was just kind of crushed for the night. And I went and played video games with my friends instead. Eventually, I did sit down and look for some new camera mount arm rig things, and I found the Neewer NK002 overhead camera rig. I don't know if this is going to work for exactly what I want, but we're going to give it a shot. So I'm going to be setting that up in the background, foreground. I'll be setting that up while I talk about some other stuff. All right, while I'm installing that, let's look at some things that might make your hobbying a little easier. I found that the easier it is for you to actually sit down and do it, the more likely you are to do it. By this, I mean, if you have to spend a lot of time digging out your paint, your brushes, etc., everything, every time you want to paint, how often are you actually going to paint? Or will you look at it and say, this is too much effort. I'll do that later. I'm guilty of this a lot myself. So tip number 1 is going to be set up a dedicated painting space if you're able to. If you have a dedicated workspace, a desk, maybe a spare table where you can neatly store your paints, brushes, and other gear, where all you have to do is sit down and start painting, you're in a great spot. This space doesn't have to be large, and I've seen some great pictures on Reddit of people's setups that really don't take up any space at all. However, maybe your current living arrangement doesn't really allow you to have a permanent setup. Maybe you don't have a spare desk or table where you can just leave your stuff out all the time. That's okay too. I would recommend looking into a portable painting station. There are some really great ready-made ones out there, like Frontier Wargaming's paint case. This stores paints, brushes, minis, everything you need, and unfolds and has a nice little work area. The entire thing folds up into about a briefcase size and has a really nice wood finish. You can tuck this thing away when you're not using it. I've also seen people DIY their own using some makeup train cases or other travel cases. This can be a lot more work, but you end up with something more personalized and something that's uniquely you and works for your situation. Tip number 2, wherever you paint needs to be accessible. If you need to go hiking for a few miles every time you want to paint, some days you're probably just going to decide it's not worth it. All right, that's a super extreme example, so let's look at some more realistic ones. Maybe your dedicated hobby space is out in the garage. you need to back out your car every single time you want to paint? Maybe you're thinking of converting a spare room upstairs or downstairs for your hobby. But when you're exhausted, do you really want to climb those stairs? Okay, that one might apply a little bit more to me because I have a bad knee, but still. I recommend picking a place in your home that you can easily get to and set up your painting stuff quickly. This is going to be very subjective and can vary wildly depending on your living arrangements. One of those portable paint stations I mentioned earlier could still be a great idea if you just don't have the space. I'm extremely lucky that I have a spare room in our basement where I've been able to set up all of my hobby stuff. Being able to come down here to have my desk ready to go, paints and brushes within reach, has made me paint way more often than before. If you do have space for your own setup, make sure it's somewhere that doesn't inconvenience you too much. Tip number 3, sometimes painting is overwhelming, and that's okay. I have a big pile of unpainted minis. My pile of shame, or as I prefer to call it, my pile of potential. Each of those minis has the potential to turn into something cool in the future, and that's how I choose to look at it. I think that mindset shift has helped me quite a bit too. Maybe you don't have a huge pile of unpainted minis yet. Maybe you're newer to the hobby and you're just overwhelmed trying to paint one mini or one squad. The best advice I can give here is to try to break it down into smaller bits, even on a single mini. Instead of trying to paint everything at once, let's break it down into sections. Maybe you can spend some of your time and just focus on the cool weapon he's holding. Maybe you just have enough time to paint the details on his face. That's okay. You can always come back to the same miniature later in your next hobby session. Breaking my minis down into smaller bite-sized chunks and realizing I don't have to do it all at once has helped me a lot. I still have to remind myself of this sometimes when I'm working on a larger project. Tip number 4, it's okay to take a break. Sometimes I just don't feel like painting. I don't want to build any models. Maybe I don't even want to play any tabletop games. This happens sometimes, and I found it's best for me if I just don't force it. If I really don't want to paint, forcing myself to sit down and paint has never resulted in anything good. Sometimes it really is best to just step away for a bit, take a short vacation from the hobby. It'll still be there later, and maybe other interests are drawing your attention right now. That's okay. Tip number 5, have fun with your hobby. There've been a few times over the years where I've sat back and realized I just wasn't having fun, or that what I was doing was stressing me out. I specifically got into this hobby as stress relief. So if I'm getting stressed out, I'm doing something wrong. When I realize I'm not having fun anymore or I'm getting stressed out, I take a step back and look at what I'm doing. Maybe the rule system for the game I'm playing just isn't for me. Maybe I need to try a different game. Maybe the models that I'm trying to paint just aren't scratching that itch and I'm not into them as much as I thought I'd be. Sometimes I need to just set aside a project because I'm not enjoying it right now. I'd rather pull out some different models if it means I'm gonna have more fun or less stress. Those are the most important things for me in this hobby: fun and stress relief. Tip number 6 is actually for me, but it might help you guys too. But it's a reminder for me mostly. Not everything you paint needs to be for a video. I struggle with this one a lot. I keep trying to think up video ideas for every single miniature I paint. I don't need to do that. I need to still be able to paint minis just for fun, not having to worry about a deadline or some video coming up. Sometimes we can paint things that aren't for YouTube, and that's okay. Let me know down below if you have any tips you'd like to share with your fellow painters and hobbyists. Anything you've found to actually make it easier to enjoy the hobby. I've got this new mount set up now, and I'm hopeful it'll work for my needs. And if you'd like to watch some more painting videos, check out this video next.